Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another day of Aquarium Online Academy. My name is Sarah. I'm one of the educators here at the Aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach, California, and I'm so excited to join you this morning. Now, we are going to be doing something pretty neat today, and you might notice that I've got some gear with me today that I don't usually have when I'm teaching these programs. I've got some binoculars. And I'll tell you all about what we need those binoculars for in just a moment, but I do want to set us up for our program today. And I want to set us up by sharing how you can communicate with us. So we're going to be going on a grand adventure, one of my favorite things to do. But if you want to participate, if you want to let us know that you're here with us, if you want to share your observations, so things that you're noticing as we're traveling around today, if you have questions, if you want to know something about what we're seeing, or you want to see something different, or maybe you see something that we don't, you can go ahead and text us. Now, I've got Captain Sergio with us, and maybe that will give you a hint of what we're doing today. So, Captain Sergio just put up our text line. So, you can text us at 562-286-1838 with any of those questions or observations or just hellos to us. Or you can also email us at live@lbaop.org. Now, if you're watching live, so it is Tuesday morning on October 15th, that text line is going to be the best way to reach us. And then if you're watching after the fact, you can go ahead and use that email, but we'll try and respond to either one. All right, everyone, are you ready to hear what we're doing today? Now, maybe you saw the title of this program, but we are going whale watching. Now, everyone out there watching, raise your hand or give me a whale fluke or whale tail if you've been whale watching before. Excellent. Now, if you've been whale watching and you want to share what you've already seen on a boat, go ahead and text us. But we're going to take a trip out on the open Pacific Ocean, which is what we call our ocean backyard. So, right outside our aquarium, if I walked outside the front door right now, I would look to my right and I would see water. Now, that's just the harbor, but there's a company out there, and that boat company, we partner with them and we train our staff to be what we call naturalists on the boat. Now think for a minute, what do you think it means to be a naturalist on a whale watch boat? Now I was a naturalist, so I can tell you what my experience was like, but I want you to think for a moment, what do you think I did as a naturalist on a boat? Do you think I just went and looked for whales? I mean, that would be pretty fun. But we were actually working on the boat. Now, we weren't helping the boat run. We weren't doing any of the sort of technical things that you need to do on a boat. But as a naturalist, my job, or our team's job here, is to talk about the natural world around us. So that meant talking about the whales, if and when we see them, talking about other animals, because there might be other animals we see, and then talking about the landscape. Now, sometimes when we're out there, all we see is ocean, but there's actually a lot to talk about because we know a lot about what's underneath the surface. And so we'll talk about that, or if we see any mountain ranges or islands, like Catalina is one of the islands that we can often see when we're on the boat, we'll talk about that as well. So a naturalist talks about the natural world around us, and that's what we do on the boats. Now, I'm going to take you on the boat with us. And when you come on the boat, you become scientists. You can even practice being a naturalist and sharing the things that you know about the natural world and the things we're seeing. Now, before we go on the boat, think about some gear that you might need. Now, I've got some of it with me already, right? Binoculars can be really helpful on a boat to see things that might be hard to see because they're so tiny, to see them in the distance. And that helps us know where we need to go when we're cruising around. Now, the captain does a really good job and our crew does a good job too, but there's wildlife all around us. So we all might be looking this way, and maybe you're looking this way and you might see something. And so having binoculars can help us find those things. What other gear might you want to bring with you? Think about it. If you're going on a boat and you're going to be a scientist, what else might you take with you? Now, I like to take lots of layers because I get really cold on the boat. Now, in the summer, it's really nice on the boat, especially when it's hot out, because when the boat's moving, it feels like natural air conditioning. But in the winter, it can be really cold. So I bring a long sleeve shirt and a sweatshirt and often a vest and then a big jacket. So lots of layers are important. And a hat, too, to keep the sun out of my face, which means lots of sunscreen, too. And then always also important is water and snacks. What do you think what kind of snacks would you bring on the boat? I've got my favorite snacks I like to bring. But if you want to share with us your favorite snacks, you could, of course, go ahead and text us. But I'll share my favorite snacks to take on the boat are either goldfish crackers or the Ritz peanut butter crackers, the little sandwich ones with the peanut butter in the middle. Those are my favorite boat snacks. But now that we've got our gear ready, let's head out on the boat. So I'm going to actually take off my binoculars for now. I'm going to say they're set aside. And we are going to head out. So right here, what you see right here, this is not the open ocean. This is here at the aquarium. This is our blue cavern exhibit, but this is the type of habitat that we're going to be sailing over. So we may not see all the things we see here, but we're going to be sailing over this type of habitat, a kelp forest. And there's particular animals, whales and other animals, who live in this type of habitat. And that's what we're going to be looking for today. So I'm going to have Captain Sergio take us out on the water. And as we head out, beautiful day out, nice and sunny. Now I'll tell you that's lucky because lately here it's been really foggy and we call it socked in. So when our boat goes out, it's so foggy it's really hard to see anything. So this is a beautiful day, which make great condition for whale watching. Now as we're heading out, I want to give you a couple tips. So this is what we say when we're on the boat. We give some indicators to look for. As I mentioned that Captain Sergio and our crew, they do a really good job of looking for and spotting animals. But it's so helpful when all of our guests, that means all of you scientists, when you keep an eye on the water as well. Now you might think, oh, I'm an expert, I know how to spot things. Or maybe you've never been whale watching before and you're like, I don't even know what I'm looking for. So we have 3 indicators, 3 things that we look for when we're trying to spot whales, dolphins, seals, sea lions, really any life out there. So the first thing we look for is splashing. Now, this is continuous splashing like this. Now, sometimes, especially in the winter when it's kind of windy, we get what's called white caps, where there's a little bit of a wave and it creates some foam. But what we're looking for is continuous splashing over and over and over. And that could be a sign of dolphins, because dolphins often swim in these big groups, and so they make lots of splashes. So that's the first thing we look for is lots of continuous splashing. The second thing we look for are birds. Now, you might wonder, what do birds have to do with looking for whales and dolphins? But birds actually spend a lot of seabirds spend a lot of time at the water, in the water, or on the surface because they're feeding. They feed on things like fish and shrimp and krill and other little things swimming in the water. And that food source is the same thing that a lot of these bigger animals feed on. So if there's birds diving into the water and tons of birds around, that could be a good indication there's a lot of food, and that could tell us there's bigger animals there as well. So the second thing we look for is bird activity. And then the third thing we look for, we'll see if Captain Sergio can put up a picture of the blow or spout from a whale. So whales are mammals like us. Now, you may not have realized that we have anything in common with a whale, but we are all mammals, which means we use our lungs to breathe air. Everyone take a deep breath. It feels really nice, right? But we breathe in through our nose or mouth, and that air goes into our lungs, and then we exhale. Whales, they do the same thing. Now, their lungs are much larger than our lungs, and they can hold a lot more air, and they can hold their breath for a lot longer than we can, but they are still holding their breath when they're underwater, and they have to come to the surface to exhale before inhaling and diving back down. Now, when they come to the surface, okay, here's a great look at the blowhole of a whale. So right here, this is like this is their nostrils. So think about if we took our nose and we moved it up to the top of our head. That would be our blowhole or our nose, just like the whale. So at the front of their heads, they don't have a nose like us. Their nose is here. And this whale here has 2 blowholes, which is significant, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But these 2 nostrils are kind of like our nostrils. So you can see in this picture they're open, which means that whale is exhaling. And then when they dive down, they pinch them closed, kind of like if we were to hold our nose, but they could do it without holding it, right? They don't have hands. They can't use their flippers to hold their nose. So they can actually close it on their own. Now, if you see here, it almost looks, you can see there's openings here. So what happens, and it's kind of curved a little bit. So what happens is when the whale comes to the surface, they're going to exhale, but their nostrils kind of create this little curve, almost like a little cup or a bowl. And so when they come to the surface and they exhale, there is a little bit of water that gets caught in that sort of dip space. And so when they exhale, they send a little bit of water up into the air. And the air in their lungs, here we're going to get a good image of it. This is a gray whale we're looking at here, and it's going to come to the surface. There you go. It looks like more than a little bit of water. So that water's not coming from inside their body. It's actually just from what's sitting up above their nostrils or their blowhole when they come to the surface. Watch it again. Excellent. Now, it kind of looks like a cloud of mist or smoke, and that's because the air inside their lungs is really hot. If you cup your hands and breathe like this into your hands, and you feel your breath, it's pretty warm because the breath inside our lungs is warm. Now, for the whales, it's really warm inside, but when it mixes with that really cold water and the cold air, it turns that water basically into vapor, and it makes that cloud of mist or smoke. Now, depending on the type of whale, that blow or spout can go about 30 feet high in the air. Now, that gray whale we saw, that was pretty low. Gray whales are a little bit smaller, and depending on the shape of their nostrils, so their nostrils are kind of angled a little bit different, their blows are going to look a little different and be different heights. But a blue whale, which is the largest animal on the planet at 100 plus feet, their blow, it can go about 30 feet high in the air. And what that means is we can see it from quite a distance. So your binoculars help, but even just using your eyes, you can see that blow from quite a distance. And so that is the third thing we're looking for, the blow or spout from a whale. So we're looking for splashing or wave action. We're looking for birds, and we're looking for that blow or spout. All right. Are you ready to, and we're already setting sail, but are you ready to look for those three indicators? Now, we just got to keep an eye on things, looking all over because wildlife can pop up anywhere. And we like to joke, although hopefully we'll have more luck today, that whale watching sometimes involves a lot of whale waiting because these animals, they do whatever they want. And so we're just trying to catch them when they're at the surface. So we're going to put our trust in Captain Sergio. He's a great captain. You don't have to worry. But we're going to put our trust in Captain Sergio to help us find something really cool. So let's keep looking. You got your binoculars. If you don't have binoculars, your hands work perfect as binoculars, especially in this virtual whale watch. Oh, Captain just told me he thinks he sees something. Let's keep looking. Ooh, there's maybe some fins. Oh my goodness. Look at this. So not whales yet, but this is a really fun animal that we have living here along our coast. Can anyone guess or does anyone know what this animal is? Remember, if you recognize this animal or you see anything else when we're out in the water, you can text us at 562-286-1838. But these are California sea lions. Excellent, everyone. So we have both seals and sea lions here along our coast, but these ones specifically are California sea lions. Now I'm going to walk across and I'm going to grab. We also bring what we call biofacts and tools with us on the boat. So I've got some examples or models of some of the things that we can see. So I have my model of a California sea lion, so you can see the full body of these animals here. But we're getting a good look at their flippers. Right here's a flipper. Here's a flipper. There's a tail flipper, flipper, and flipper here. And then we can see the head of 2, 3 sea lions. Now these animals, we see them often on the boats because they're eating in the water. They're swimming around. And especially when we see a lot of birds and dolphins and whales all eating together, there's a good chance we see these friends hanging out as well. Now, we captured sea lions doing something really interesting right here. So oftentimes we'll see them what's called porpoising, which means coming up out of the water like this, sort of like a dolphin moves. And they do that because there's actually less drag, less pull on their body out of the water than there is in the water. They are excellent swimmers in the water. But if they want to go really fast, they'll actually jump out of the water. But what these sea lions here are doing is something called thermoregulating. We can say that all together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Thermoregulating, which what that means is they're regulating their body temperature. And they'll do this both if they get too hot in the water or if they get too cold. So it kind of depends on what the weather is like and what they're doing. But there are a lot of blood vessels in their flippers. We've got blood vessels going through our body too, but there's a lot in their flippers. And so if they're swimming around too much and they get too hot, they'll stick their flipper up out of the water and the cold breeze will help cool their body down. Or if it's pretty cold in the water and it's summer, maybe they're not swimming as much and their body's kind of cold and it's summer outside, or it's summer and it's warm outside, they can stick their flipper up and the sun will heat up their body and warm them up. So it doesn't mean that they're actually warming or cooling their body necessarily, but they are regulating their body temperature. And so it sort of just depends on the circumstance, whether they're heating or cooling their body. But we'll often see them just sticking their flippers up out of the water as a way to regulate that temperature. Excellent. All right. Let's hit the road again, or hit the boat, the water, whatever you want to say the saying is. Captain Sergio is going to take us on, and we're going to keep looking for more animals. Now, those sea lions, they are mammals just like the whales and us humans. So they're using lungs to breathe. Their lungs, they can hold more air than ours, and they can stay underwater for about 15-20 minutes, but we often see them hanging out at the surface. So let's see what else we can spot. Now, as we're looking, and this happens when we're out on the boat too, sometimes we go long periods of time when we don't see any animals. But there's still a lot to talk about, like I said. So as I mentioned, this is a kelp forest habitat that's right here along our coast. And our water is what we call temperate, which means it's not too warm and not too cold. So if we think about tropical water, like maybe Hawaii area, that water is really warm. And then if you think about Alaska, that water is really cold. But here, our water in Southern California, it's in the middle. It's generally about the low 60s, which is really good for a lot of algae to grow. Algae are like plants in the water. And those algae growing in that cold, nutrient rich water feed a lot of tiny things like shrimp and fish. And those are the things that these bigger animals feed on. And so that makes our coastline a really great place for a lot of these large animals because we have a strong and steady, abundant supply of their food. And our water stays pretty cold year round, even in the summer, and so that keeps the food supply year round. So that's what makes. Ooh, Captain Surgery said there's something on our starboard side. Does anyone know what their starboard side is? Now, that sometimes those terms can be kind of confusing, but that's going to be our right hand side. And then port is our left hand side. So the starboard is going to be our right hand side. So let's get our binoculars, looking out, see what we can see. If we see what Captain Sergio sees. Look what Captain found us. Amazing. So this is our first whale spotting. Now, is anyone going to correct me there? Because I said the first whale spotting, but I bet when you see these animals, you call them something different. Did you call them a whale? Probably not. You probably said dolphin, which is correct. But all dolphins are actually types of whales. So whale is sort of a more general term, and we break them down into different groups. And dolphins actually fall into our toothed whale category. So whales are broken down into two groups. We've got baleen whales, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and toothed whales. And toothed whales, what do you think they have in it? That's right, they've got teeth. And dolphins are a type of toothed whale. So what we have here is a pod of common dolphins. Now, some people like to joke that this name, common dolphin, is kind of misleading because these are beautiful dolphins and they're not very common looking. But we call them common dolphins because we have such a high population of them here in Southern California that we see them quite often. But they're pretty magical and magnificent to see. Now, these common dolphins, they get about 6 to 7 feet long, so larger than most humans, but not super huge in terms of dolphins and whales. But what's neat to this pod, and pod is a group of dolphins, is this is what we call a nursing pod, which means there's a lot of cat or mom and baby pairs. I'll give you one play over. If you can spot any of the babies, or how would you know that it's a baby dolphin? And then point out a couple areas where we can see those babies. We've got some baby action. I can see it. So the babies, as you probably guessed, are going to be smaller. There's going to be, towards the end of the video, right around here, is going to be a good baby image. Right there. There's a baby. There. Oh, that one. So obviously they're smaller, but we often see a larger dolphin with a smaller dolphin sort of just behind it. So you might see a bigger dolphin come up and a little one just right after. So watch right around here. You'll see there. That was the baby. And they kind of look like they're jumping. Their body isn't as large and they're still learning how to swim. So they look kind of funny when they're coming up out of the water. So dolphins are mammals, which means they give live birth. They don't lay eggs. And the babies are going to stay with their moms for quite a while, nursing or feeding on milk. That's another characteristic of a mammal, is feeding their young milk. And so we can see these nursing pods because there's oftentimes lots of cow-calf or mom and baby pairs. Now, other times when we see pods, they could have babies in it, but we know nursing pods because there's such a high volume of those cow-calf pairs. In this group, there's lots of moms and babies. Now, one thing I want to point out, and maybe Sergio can bring up a picture of a common dolphin, is sometimes when we're out on the boat, it's kind of hard to tell what we're looking at. But I use a couple clues or a couple tactics to try and figure out what I'm looking at before I share with the guests, especially when we're seeing dolphins, because there's actually two kinds of dolphins that are common for us to see: common dolphins and bottlenose dolphins. And the way that I can tell the difference are size and the color on their body, which is why I want to see if we can get a picture. Excellent. So these are a bottlenose dolphin. So see how their body is all gray? It's one solid color. Their belly is a little bit lighter. It's kind of hard to tell. But pretty much their body's a solid color, and they're much larger. These ones get about 13 feet long. So 6 or 7 feet to 13 feet is quite significant. So that's one way. The other way is looking at the color. So sometimes when I am looking at these dolphins and I haven't quite figured it out, I'll explain these things before I can identify, and then I'll make sure I'm giving the correct identification. So look at the color pattern on this common dolphin. It has multiple colors, right? So it's got this dark gray on top. It's got this kind of cream color in the middle, and then it's kind of hard to see, but it also has a white along the bottom. So it's almost like it's got 3 different colors. And that is a characteristic of the common dolphin. And so that's how we can tell we're looking at this dolphin as opposed to the bottlenose. And then we've got this one here, which looks completely different from the other two. Now, this is a treat to see. This is called a Pacific white-sided dolphin. You can kind of get an idea why it's called a white-sided dolphin, right? It's got white along its sides. And the other thing it's got is this 2-color dorsal fin. So the dorsal fin's the one on the back, and their dorsal fin is 2 colors. Now, both the bottlenose and the common dolphin, their dorsal fin is just 1 color. But the Pacific white-sided has this 2-color dorsal fin. Now, why I said that seeing these ones is a treat is because we really only see them in the winter months. So we're in October, so there's a chance that we could start seeing them on our boats right now, probably through maybe February-ish, but we don't see them as often, whereas those bottlenose and the common we see year-round. These ones are more of a seasonal. And another difference is look at their nose. Let's see if we can go back to either one of the bottlenose or the common really quick. Excellent. So see how they've got this sort of snout almost? It's like their head kind of curves down, and then they've got this beak almost. Now let's go back to the Pacific white-side. They don't have that. So that's just a different structure to their body than the other two. They're all dolphins, they're all toothed whales, but we can tell that this is a different kind of dolphin if we're looking at it because it doesn't have that same rostrum, that same sort of long beak-like nose on the Pacific white-sided dolphin. Excellent. So we've now looked at or seen 3 different types of dolphins. But let's hit the water again and see what else we can find. I wonder if there's any big whales out there. What do you all think? Did anyone see anything? Did you see that? Oh my goodness. This is a humpback whale's tail. This is a fluke. Now, I've got a lot of things to tell you about this whale and this specific whale. And that is true that I do know who this specific whale is. And I can tell you that I've actually seen this whale out in the water. Now, I did not take this picture, but I have seen this humpback out in the open ocean. Now, a couple things before I get to how I know who this whale is. So this is a humpback whale. Humpbacks are one of the whales that we do commonly see here. They used to sort of have a season here, but now we pretty much can see them year round, although right now is a really great time. If you are anywhere close to the coast and you have a chance to either come join us at the Aquarium of the Pacific on our whale watch or any of the whale watch companies all along our coast. There's whale watch companies in Redondo Beach. There are companies in, I think, Marina del Rey, and then the other direction in Dana Point and Newport and Huntington. Any of those companies, if you get a chance to go out whale watching, I highly recommend it because there's lots happening. Captain Sergio was out on the water on Sunday, and he saw 5 or 6 humpbacks altogether. This whale that we're looking at right here, which is pretty cool. So they don't really have a season, although right now is a good time to see them. But they do visit our coastline, and they come here to feed. So there's a lot of whales who will come to our coastline for feeding, and then they go elsewhere for breeding. So the way it works is most whales, they want warm water when they're giving birth. It's calmer, it's easier, it's better for the baby because that baby doesn't have a layer of blubber, that layer of fat on its body yet. And so it needs to drink a lot of milk to kind of grow a little bit. And so being born in warm water is a little bit safer for that animal. And then they're going to go to cooler waters to feed because, as I mentioned before, our coastline, our water stays cold, which helps feed all the food that these animals are eating. And so they're going to come to the colder waters to feed. And so that's why we see humpbacks. We see them here to feed. Now, humpbacks are my favorite whale to see. They tend to be the most acrobatic. So sometimes we'll see them breaching, which is just throwing their whole body up out of the water. Sometimes we see them do what's called peck slapping, where they take their pectoral flippers and they kind of lean on the side so their whole body's underwater except for their pectoral flipper, and they just smack the water. Sometimes they'll do what's called a tail lob. So here's their tail, and they'll throw it to the side. And then sometimes we'll see them do what's called lunge feeding, which is what we're going to see here. So the group of humpbacks right there is lunge feeding. So that's where they come up to the surface to feed with their baleen. Now, their baleen is what's in their mouth. I mentioned before that there's two types of whales, toothed whales and baleen whales. So humpbacks are part of that baleen whale family. Maybe we have a picture of the full body of a humpback. Or this, perfect, that's what I want to see. Their baleen right here. So unlike those dolphins, which have teeth in their mouth, and they use those teeth to grab a hold of their food, big whales like humpbacks, blues, fins, grays, the big whales, they have baleen in their mouth. And baleen is sort of like a brush. Now, I've got a piece of baleen from a humpback whale. I'm going to bring in front of the camera. So I'm actually going to bring it really close. It's going to be kind of an awkward view, but here is that baleen. This is the outside of it. So this is what we're looking at on our whale. And then if I turn it around, it's got all these bristles. It's almost like a brush. So the way that these whales feed is this humpback whale is going to dive down into the water, and they're going to open their mouth up really, really wide. And then if you see here, they've got these grooves, these lines in their throat, and that helps their throat expand because the more water they can take in, the more food they're going to be able to eat. And so when they take in more water, once they've like got that big gulp of water, they're not going to swallow it. They're going to contract. They're going to kind of bring in all those pleats, and they're going to use their tongue, which is really big, to push water out of their mouth. These plates that are only on the upper side of the jaw act kind of like a pasta strainer. Think about if you have ever, or if you watched an adult make pasta, you boil the pasta in water, but then when you're ready to eat it, you're not eating the water. You need to separate the pasta from the water. So you put it into a strainer, which can be plastic or metal and has little holes in it. And when you pour the pasta in, the water comes out, but the pasta gets caught. That's how their baleen works. So the water is going to pass through these baleen plates, but all those little bits of food, the little shrimp or krill or fish, get caught on those baleen plates on the inside, and then the humpback uses their tongue to lick all that food off. So that's how these whales feed. Excellent. Now let's go back to that picture of the humpback, the tail, because I mentioned that I know who this humpback is. So we have actually, and by we I mean the larger whale watch community, not myself or not Captain Sergio or I, although that would be pretty cool if we got to do this. But there is a big project to study these whales, to research them, and to sort of follow them and track their movements. And then we also name them too. So this specific humpback whale, his name is Chief. And I'll tell you how I know his name is Chief. So there's these markings on his tail, right? So every humpback has an individual pattern or design on their humpback or on their tail. It's kind of like our fingerprints. If you look really closely at your fingers, you've got all these little designs on the pads of your fingers. And your fingerprints, that pattern that you have on all 10 of your fingers, that is individual or unique just to you. Unless you're an identical twin out there, everyone else besides identical twins, they have unique fingerprints. So my sort of order of fingerprints and my pattern is different from everyone else on the entire planet. Isn't that kind of cool to think about? And that's how you can be identified by your fingerprints. Humpback whales, they can be identified by the pattern on their fluke or the underside of their tail. And Chief has a couple of significant things, but the biggest thing that we look for Chief is our googly eyes. I